You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Well, welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. Everybody knows podcasting is the rage. And while very few podcasts make it, including in the Jewish world, but some have been very successful. Yaakov Langer is a podcaster. He's done some very popular ones. He's currently doing Inspiration Nation and putting together a whole podcast network. So, Yaakov, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And I have to say, I'm sure you get this all the time, but like you're a legend. For me to be on your show is like the greatest honor. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope not a legend in my own mind. So, podcasting became big, and there's so many out there. It's hard to differentiate, but yet you've done a good job. You were with Meaningful Podcasts. I think, was that your first successful podcast venture?
Yeah, that was the first podcast, Meaningful People, I did together with Naki Gordon. We started it, and it's great, and it's still going on. He's doing it with another host now, but yeah, I did that for 2 years, and it was incredible. It was so much fun and inspiring for myself, and I think we always imagined it would do well. I don't think we imagined how well it would do. And it was a lot of fun.
So what do you attribute that it did so well?
I think it was a mixture between great timing and I think hard work. The timing was, we started recording in late 2019, and our goal was to put out our first episode a little after Pesach. And as everyone knows, that was when the shutdown happened. So a little before Pesach, we just said, okay, we're going to record a few intros and outros. And I think there was a hole in I guess, the community. At that point, the world, there were a lot of podcasts and a lot of interviews, but there wasn't so many hour-long conversations that people had to really get to know someone. So I think that it was very, easy to fill that hole. And that was the start of my podcasting career, I guess.
So you didn't do podcasts, you didn't do radio beforehand?
Never did radio. For years, I always did newsletters, whether it was in camp, my Bono colony, in my yeshiva. I don't know if there's a connection there. I think it's the idea of like creating content that people like and consume. So, it's more written form, or I guess email form. But I think that there's some similarity in terms of like entertaining and keeping people's attentions and kind of storytelling within.
So tell us about yourself. So here you are. I know you're a digital marketer. You're now doing podcasting, you're creating podcasting with other people. But obviously you're into communications. Did you develop that at an early age, aside from the newsletters from Cam? Were there other ways? Were you starting the school play, or what were you doing that got you out there in the public eye?
So yeah, I don't know fully the answer. I'm the youngest of 4 boys. I think it was always, I have very funny, intelligent brothers. So it was always this idea of like, okay, if you want attention, you have to like say something or do something that's actually worth it to be looked at. I have very personable parents. To me, they're both very funny and very entertaining and very inspiring. So yeah, I do like, I don't think I ever envisioned myself to be in Hollywood, but I was in the camp plays or writing the plays, and it was a lot of fun for me. So I think once I got started on like social media, I guess, whether it was like Instagram or I think Snapchat was my first one, and then it turned into WhatsApp stories, and I guess over time it turned into like podcasts and like being a YouTuber. But I guess that's where it came from.
Now, you mentioned YouTube. So in addition to podcasts, you have the visual component as well. From what I understand, you have a tremendous amount of people that watch you on YouTube.
Yeah, so thank God. So we're about to hit 5 million views across the entire platform after a little more than a year and a half, I think. And so basically, currently we have 5 podcasts, 5 shows, and it's all under this umbrella, which I named Living L'Chaim. The goal of it is to create content, whether it's videos on YouTube or podcasts that help. It started with Jewish people, but honestly, it turned into help anyone who's watching live a more joyful life. There's so many tools out there for people to live life, and we have halacha, and we have so many great, incredible ideas and speeches to help guide us to live life properly. But I always felt that we could always use a little more, whether it's entertainment or whether just practically. Like I don't know anything about finances, and I can listen to Dave Ramsey all day, but at the end of the day, he's helping a lot of people in middle America who maybe have one kid and one dog and 7 cars. That doesn't relate to a guy living in the 5 towns who has 7 kids and send in tuition and trying to pay off his mortgage. So just all together, that's, I guess, what Living L'Chaim is. And similarly to when I started podcasting, like I thought people would be interested. I just didn't realize how many people. I mean, last week we just, thank God, surpassed 100,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel. And it's, I guess there's this tremendous interest to navigate the world of finances, navigate the world of mental health, navigate just, inspiration for the nation, getting to know the personalities that you read about or hear about on a deeper level in an authentic way.
And obviously you have, what do you have? Kosher Money? Is that one?
Yes.
Of your
Living L'Chaim, we have 5 shows. I'm the host of Inspiration for the Nation. And then we have 4 other shows. I think the most popular show as of now is Kosher Money, hosted by my brother, Eli Langer. And each episode, he sits down with someone who is something to do with money. So we'll have someone who's, a credit card professional. He knows everything there is to know about credit cards, what to do, what not to do. And he'll sit down and we'll have a conversation. He'll have a conversation about it. And then we'll have a rabbi who's, understands all the parts of the Torah that talks about money and how Hashem relates to money and talks about Meiser. And that episode would be like how money relates to spirituality. And then we'll have someone who's, proficient in healthcare. These are things they don't teach you in school. Like, I don't know which healthcare I should use or I could use, and we have a conversation with someone in that field to really navigate it. So someone can walk out of there and say, great, now I know how to budget. Now I know how to, deal with healthcare. Again, it's not like a masterclass. You don't know everything there is, but it definitely starts the conversation, and hopefully you could progress after that.
How long is your typical podcast in length?
It depends on which show, but generally throughout all of them, they're around an hour. Sometimes they're an hour and a half. Sometimes they're 40 minutes, but I would say average an hour typically for the shows.
Okay, that's interesting. Yaakov Langer is our guest. He is a podcaster par excellence. Well, most people in podcasting don't get the kind of numbers he has, but between YouTube and the podcast platform, he gets millions of people that listen and watch not only his podcast, but other podcasts as well. So here's the question, Yaakov. How do you monetize?
That's a good question. To be honest, this for me is a side gig. It's a hobby. I primarily work for, I have a marketing firm and I have clients and stuff like that. But there's 2 ways generally to really, if you want to start podcasting to make money. One of them is to get ads within your podcast. So, halfway through your podcast, you're going to start talking about whatever it is, Strites Matzah, or whoever wants to pay you money to talk about their product or organization or whatever it is. That's one way to get money. And another way is through YouTube. YouTube pays you to put ads on your videos. So those are the 2 ways. Currently, right now, the model is we're almost finished applying for a non-for-profit. But currently, any money that comes in, we put directly back into the shows, whether it's marketing or just being able to bring guests that can't travel, so we could pay for their travel, and just really, promote and push our shows as far as we can.
So just explain for everyone, because YouTube, would you say that you're making most of your money from YouTube as opposed to running commercials on the shows itself? What audio?
As of now, I would say we're making more money from the ads within the podcast, as opposed to YouTube. I think for a YouTube channel, like we're making solid money, but for the amount of work that we're putting in, it's definitely not worth the money. Like, okay, great. Like it's a nice, like for me, I look at it as like a nice bonus. Like, okay, great. $1,000 here or $4,000 here after time. But for the amount of hours and effort and editing we're putting in, it doesn't match up. But it's nice, like, hey, great. Like now we have a little more money to spend on reaching a bigger audience.
So what does YouTube expect you to do that you're not doing anyway for your broadcasting?
Could you clarify the question?
In other words, you're saying for the work it didn't warrant, you're not getting enough of a return.
Yeah,
You're putting together a good product, you're putting commercials in. So what does YouTube require you to do that you're not already doing to finesse your project?
got it. So it used to be, I don't know, like 20 years ago, if you asked a kid what's his dream job, I think the number one was like an astronaut. Right now in 2022, the number one job that kids want to do is they want to be a YouTuber, and myself included. I feel kind of cool that like I'm finally into that world. But the thing is, it is tremendously difficult to make a significant living on YouTube. So the ones that you always hear about, people, Mr. Beast or PewDiePie, are like some of the biggest YouTubers out there. They are making millions, if not near billions of dollars through YouTube. But they're like the top 1% doesn't even make sense. It's less than 1% that is like killing it and making so much money. So I'm probably in the other department of like, I'm not making no money, but I'm making some money. It's really difficult to make a career out of making money on YouTube. Like I wouldn't, like anyone who I get questions all the time about starting podcasts. Like I tell most people, like, just if you could start off and see where it takes you, but like don't expect this to become your full-time thing. You have to be very passionate about it, and you also have to like not be in it for the money, because it's I think it's discouraging for the amount of money that you could get for the amount of work that you put in. At least as of now, I don't know. Maybe things will change. I'll be in the top 1% soon, but I don't see that happening yet.
You're not counting on the podcasting or the YouTubing for your parnassa, for your livelihood that you're doing from your digital marketing company.
Yes, I've been involved in a bunch of organizations through. I mean, I'm still young, I'm 30, but I've always seen different organizations when it's someone's full-time position. It all of a sudden, you could see them making decisions sometimes based on, okay, what could bring in the most revenue, while ultimately it's not necessarily the best for the product. So as long as I can distance myself from full-time focusing on living l'chaim, I'm going to try to do that, because now I have a very clear head. It's extremely and very unimportantly not about any money that comes in, because I don't see any of that as of now. So I just put it right back in. So then I could develop my product and make it better and better. And yeah, that's the goal for right now.
So it's a labor of love primarily.
Yeah, I spend a ridiculous amount of time and effort and hours on this. Shout out to my wife, who's so wonderful and supportive and gives me so much time to do all of this.
She's not doing a podcast.
No, but you know what? She co-hosted with me one of our podcasts. I had Danielle Renoff from Israel, the Peas, Love, and Carrots. And my wife's a big fan, and it was like just so native to have her as a co-host. So everyone could check that out if you want to know who my wife is. She's great. She could have a podcast, but she's just busy becoming a food scientist and taking care of my kid. So
she can do a kosher food show, right?
She could. It's totally open for her. I could totally see that happening.
But you didn't meet over the podcast, right? You met prior to podcasting.
Yeah. It's funny because I was a goody in Israel, and I was single in Israel for 4 years studying by Rabbi Senter's yeshiva. And my last year that I was there, I kept on bumping into my future wife. Again, bumping into means like I saw her by a restaurant, and I was with my friend who his sister was friends with Gita, my now current wife. And he saw that there's some interest in me. I'm like, I keep on seeing her. She looks like a nice, great girl. And my friends are all like, go over to her. I'm like, no, I'm here to study. I'm here to learn. I'm not going over. And then what happened was, after I got back from Israel, I started dating, and it just didn't come up. I was dating great girls. And then someone mentioned it to me about this girl, Gita Elephant, and I'm like, I know that name, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Okay, and we started going out, and I'm like, this girl that I had a crush on in Israel. By the way, she had no clue who I was. Like, didn't even remember a little, but I knew her. Like, all my friends were like, "Oh my gosh, isn't that the girl that you like?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, I guess I just waited. It was the right person and in the right time in the right setting, and that's how we met.
Sure, it's a very nice story. Things click, but not in the way that it does on the podcast. What
Yeah.
about programming for Jewish women? Because or hosted by Jewish women. Have you done anything in that realm?
Yeah, so one of the podcasts is called Not Your Typical Podcast, and it's with the lovely Charlene Amanoff, who's like a rock star in the Instagram world. She's someone I've interviewed her in the past. She's someone that she grew up a lot more modern, not as observant, and through tragedy, her daughter, thank God, is totally fine. There's a happy conclusion to the story, but her daughter basically drowned and she was revived. She came back, but in that moment, she made a deal with Hashem. She made a deal with God and said, "I will work on covering my hair." And from that, she started a wig company. So she has a massive following, and she's someone that she's not a rebbitzin. She's not a rabbi's wife. She's someone who's like, just another person, but she's so tapped into spirituality and being connected to God. And I always felt that there's not enough content in the Jewish space by women, made for women. There's shirim, that's nice, but there's not. I mean, I think men we have it easy in a certain way. We have a lot of going to shul, and you have your rabbis and yeshivas and all that. And so each episode, Charlene either sits down by herself to talk about a topic, whether it's about making Shabbos and how it's okay if it's hectic, or she'll bring on her friend who wasn't religious but is now religious, and or she'll bring on her husband and talk about like raising their kids. It's a fun show, but it's also people could grow from it.
Wonderful. What's your biggest challenge?
In life or my podcasts?
We can do it generally, and then as far as the podcast universe is concerned.
So I think in general, it's just me balancing everything. My wife constantly reminds me the importance of doing everything I'm doing for, I call it, the world. And it's so easy for me to get sucked in and, miss bath time because I'm doing, let's say tonight, after this, I'm doing an interview with an 89-year-old, incredible, I don't want to give spoilers away, but incredible rabbi who's has a lot of stories to say. But at the same time, I'm going to miss bath time. So it's a little of a challenge to, like, I guess, give my time, I guess, to the world. But then it comes to my wife and my family that I should be spending more time with. So that's a challenge that I am working on. And in terms of podcasting, it's very overwhelming. When I had one podcast, I remember just complaining to my wife that, like, I can't do one a week. This is too much. And literally right now, I'm not putting out 5 podcasts a week, but it's at least 2 to 3 a week. And we're coming out with another 2 or 3 shows. But it's just I guess it's like a muscle. When you start working out, you can't just lift 500 pounds. You have to work out and work out. So for me, it's just constantly working out that I guess producing muscle where I could keep everything in one set straight path of moving forward.
Sounds like you have your work cut out, but you enjoy it. You do it. It's with a passion. If you
Yeah,
enjoy what you're doing,
I enjoy every moment of it. There's definitely ups and downs and sadness and heartbreak, but there's success, and it's the love of the game. I love doing it, and it's cool. It's a cool opportunity. I feel blessed. I don't know what else to say.
no, it's great. Now, when you're admitting for people, did you leave because you want to be on your own? Because you had a successful podcast reaching lots of people. So what motivated you to decide I'm going to continue doing podcasting, but I'm veering in a different direction?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. I guarantee if I did like just one YouTube video explaining like what really happened, there would be probably 1 million views. But to put it, like, I mean, Nafi and I spoke about it, and we always knew that there'd come to a point where we would each go out on our own. Like even after we started, we each have different directions, different type of questions, different styles in terms of doing a show. So it became clear, with the name, Anaki has Meaningful Minute, and the name was Meaningful People. Although it was something that we created together, it just made sense for me to go out on my own and just start, continue to build Living L'chaim while Naki goes and takes over Meaningful People. And, to be honest, I was up for the challenge. It was hard. I walked away. It was the number one podcast. And, and now it fluctuates. Sometimes Inspiration for the Nation is number one. Sometimes Kosher Money is number one. Sometimes Bashevkin's 1840, sometimes Meaningful People. But I feel very proud to be able to, walk away from all of that was built and be able to start again, but to quickly, build up a large audience.
You mentioned number one. Who determines who's number one?
So there's charts. You can look online. There's like charts to see like number one podcast in Judaism. But I quickly realized that like it's not very accurate in terms of like sometimes a new show could quickly shoot up to number one, while the new show clearly it's not having millions of downloads. But that's the metric. But for me, the true metric is feedback. Like I know based off an episode, like I could see the numbers. I could see, some will have 7,000, some 30,000, some 50,000, 100,000. Like there's different numbers, but there's the certain episodes, it might have less people actually listening to it, but those that listen to it, if I get a reaction, if I got a text or someone goes to livingl'chaim.com, leaves feedback, that for me, it was like, whoa, there's something happening here. Like particularly there's, at this point, I've done hundreds of interviews, but there's one I did with someone, Eliza Bulow. She's not someone that is, as popular as, let's say, Yaakov Shweki, but she's someone who's a GRS. She lost her child who had autism. He had autism and he committed suicide. And then at a certain point, she lost a grandchild and her husband is no longer observant, but still she has the most faith from any person. That episode, I released it on Tisha B'Av because like there's so much pain in the episode, and it's the amount of feedback that I've gotten from that one episode. It's like it's mind blowing. If everything I did was for that one episode, that one conversation, it was worth it. And just to meet her and get to know her, like she's the most real person ever. So I think that's the best metrics, getting the feedback.
Yaakov Langer, you heard Living L'chaim. He was part of Meaningful People. Now he's doing his own meaningful work in podcasting. He has a network, including his show, which is Inspiration Nation, and other shows that he puts together under the L'chaim Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. This is a true honor. Thank you so much, Zev.
Thank you for tuning in to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.